Welcome everyone to the Northwest Region CABE CPD event. Apologies that I'm a bit delayed, but we're having some technical issues. We're working from home today. This evening we've got Lindsay Law and Laura Brown of Quadriga Contracts presenting consideration of energy efficient measures for older and traditional buildings. The presentation, we'll run through the presentation first and then follow on with some questions and answer session following that. So I'll pass you over to Lindsay.
Hi everybody. I'm just going to set the presentation up. So I'm going to go to share. You'll see my very busy desktop for a second. And then hopefully you'll be able to confirm to me that you can see the presentation. So let's give it a go. And if you could, somebody could just confirm that see the presentation, Laura, if you could do that for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself.
Yeah, so thank you for that introduction. So yes, I'm Lindsay Law. I'm Joint Managing Director of Quadriga Contracts. We're a heritage restoration contractor. I do have a few names on the session, but for those that I haven't met, our head office in Northwich, Cheshire. We have a second office in Manchester where we service our Manchester clients going to Leeds, the North East, and a third office in Edgbaston, where Midlands, and dip our toe into the south if it takes our fancy. So one of the larger heritage contractors, certainly in the north of England. With me this evening is Laura. Laura's our commercial manager. Laura joining me in the presentation towards the end. We're going to look at a project that we were involved in maybe a year or so ago, but Laura did a deep dive into this project as part of her Masters. So we're going to be looking at Moseley Road Baths. So yeah, questions at the end, absolutely fine with that. If anyone wants to put questions in the chat, Laura will keep, that's all right, Christine, and if she knows cover something. Okay, so we do a number of heritage CPDs. This latest one that we produced it actually through COVID, where we realised that the green agenda was going to be right at the top of the agenda, and we had some concerns over inappropriate retrofitting of traditional buildings. And we thought we needed to do our little bit to share our knowledge and talk about assessing the significance of these buildings. And that's going to inform our decisions and our to planning. So today we're going to be talking about fabric and significance.
It was very funny.
Not going to be talking about...
where the seating area is. I
don't know whether we've got... It's probably a good idea to mute because I'm listening to someone's conversation there. I don't know if everyone can. I don't know, is that something that you can sort out, Christine? Mute everybody. Yeah. Thank you.
I think, Lindsay, you're muted now as well.
Right, hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, we'll get there in the end, hopefully.
So yeah, our historic buildings, they've got to change, they've got to evolve if they're going to contribute to a greener future and be fit for the people who live and work in them, who care for them, who experience them. And if it's done thoughtfully and carefully, these changes can achieve the complementary goals of protecting our heritage and adapting to a climate and low carbon economy. You've jinxed me, I'm having technical difficulties now. There we go. So we're going to look at understanding net zero, the fundamentals of traditional buildings, how we assess significance, how we balance retrofit against effect on historic fabric, and then we'll finish off with a case study on Moseley Road Baths. So buildings are one of the largest contributors to UK carbon emissions. They emit carbon dioxide throughout the whole life cycle, as you'll know, from construction to demolition. And maintaining, repairing, reusing and adapting existing buildings to enable them to have continued use is one of the most effective ways to reduce carbon emissions and unnecessary waste. So the government has set a net zero carbon target of 2050. Manchester came along with a very ambitious target of 2038. I think that's the same for Liverpool, I think. Birmingham came along and flexed its muscles and said, I'll tell you what, we'll do it by 2030. The reality is that to retrofit our traditional buildings, we've got a market that needs to grow tenfold. For Manchester alone, we'd need to be retrofitting 60,000 buildings every single year to meet that target between commercial and domestic buildings. Laura and I sit on the Greater Manchester Challenge Group for low carbon buildings, and we work and breathe Manchester, and I can tell you that we're nowhere near achieving that. We also need to create 100,000 new jobs over the next 4 years. So we've got a huge task ahead of us. There was a lot of emphasis on buildings because we have these looming EPC requirements, which well, I don't know if they've been scrapped or they've been muted, certainly just for now, but they're going to rear their head in some way over the next few years, and probably when we get a change of government. So we did have this EPC requirement of level C by 2027. That was for, that would kick in when we were entering into new leases or we were selling our properties. By 2030, we needed our buildings to have an EPC of B. So massive, massive achievement. So when we're talking about retrofit, it's the process of improving the energy performance of existing buildings through technical interventions. That's what we commonly refer to as retrofit. And responsible retrofit should deliver sustained net reductions in energy use and emissions, minimal environmental impact, but by also maintaining the quality of the existing built environment and improving human health. So heritage conservation and climate action can and should be mutually reinforcing. So qualifications for retrofit. So lots of our people have CIOB certification in building conservation. That's the route we take as a contractor. We have EPC assessors for commercial buildings up to level 4, which is fairly complex commercial buildings. We can't assess at level 5, which pretty much means it's got some sort of atrium or the likes. We are involved with Greater Manchester Low Carbon's Building Challenge Group. Laura and I sit on that. It's been very quiet recently. And all of our staff hold an MVQ level 3 in energy efficiency for older and traditional buildings. And you might think, well, why are you shouting about an MVQ level 3, so what? But you'll see why that's important when we take a brief look at PAS 2038. So when we're talking about our traditional buildings, we're not just talking about listed buildings. We're not talking about buildings just in conservation areas. They actually account for about 22.5% of all of our buildings in the UK. So we're talking about solid wall construction. So what we're looking at here, very complicated, not easy to follow at all, but this is the retrofit process for traditional buildings, which was published in one of a series of occasional guidance notes by the IHBC. And these guidance notes are published and sent out to industry when we think something is into topics that are sort of crucial to promote good built and historic environmental conservation policy and practice. What you will see there is the first thing that we should be doing before we're considering even the condition of the building is understanding what's important about it. Why are we valuing this particular building? So this is just a snapshot of PAS 2038. So it looks very different from the PAS 2035 framework, which is for domestic retrofit. And we had all of these fantastic roles within PAS 2035 to include assessors, designers, etc. That doesn't exist within this particular framework. We're in the commercial arena, and we're all assuming that we're all competent professional people. What you will see if you look at the second column is when we're looking at a traditional and protected building, so it doesn't need to be listed, it doesn't need to be in a conservation area. If we've got a solid wall pre-1919 building, in order to be the retrofit lead, you need an additional qualification, and that's where the MVQ level 3 comes in. If any of you are planning to be taking the lead on retrofit, it's probably worth going out and getting that. There is funding for it at the moment, but that funding will be cut off in the not too distant future. You'll see that we assess significance first. We produce a heritage impact assessment. There will be some exemptions for some of our listed buildings, but the listed buildings are not exempt, and that is a sort of a misunderstanding, really. The only buildings that are exempt are religious buildings, if they are used for the original purpose, buildings which are due to be demolished and it's gone through planning, and also temporary buildings. But there's usually something that we can do to all buildings, whether it's just changing a light bulb. So we're unlikely to be able to say there's absolutely nothing we can do to this building because it's going to affect the significance of that building to such a degree that we can't justify it. Once we've gone through that process, then we start to follow the all buildings main process. Now, Historic England have recently produced a historic environment advice note, which is primarily aimed at LPAs, and it's to help them sort of provide clarity, support consistent decision making, and what can't be done to historic buildings to improve their energy efficiency, support carbon reduction, whilst conserving their significance. It's quite a job to do that, and we're not seeing consistency across the UK at the moment, even across our regions. Technical considerations and significance vary greatly from one building to another with our traditional buildings. There isn't going to be a one size fits all approach, and LPAs have got the really difficult challenge of reviewing the Climate Change Act, the Planning Act, the MPPF. So it's quite a job that they've got to do. So this advice note has been produced to try and help them through that process. If you haven't seen it, drop me an email and I'll happily share a copy with you. I find it particularly useful. So retrofit process is what I've put together because this just makes more sense to me. It's far cleaner. So significance, what condition is the building in, what is its current energy performance. Got to be really careful when we're looking at EPCs, to be honest. The information that we get out is only as good as the information that we put in. So we've got people doing EPCs that don't perhaps really understand traditional buildings and how they operate. We could get some really poor results. We're also, we're not talking about working to any particular building regulation. So if we can't dig into the actual construction of the building, we're going to be getting the worst case scenario out. So we shouldn't be making our recommendations based on EPCs alone. So we'll do our evaluation, we'll put some proposals together, and it's really important that we review how these buildings are performing. So why understand traditional buildings? So some of the work in response to climate change would be so harmful to a building's heritage significance that it's not going to be approved. In some cases, some impact on significance might be balanced against some real climate benefits. So every building, its solutions to reducing energy, to create carbon savings is going to be very different. But there are some principles that we can apply across the board. Historic England advocates that where we can, we should be adopting a whole building approach. So we're taking in an understanding of a building in its context, and to help us try and find a balanced solution that can help us save energy, we can sustain that significance, and really importantly, we can maintain a comfortable, healthy indoor environment. Just popped on there some polite architectural periods. In the UK, we've obviously got lots of vernacular type buildings that don't fit neatly into any of these particular categories. The technical performance and characteristics of buildings differ for all our buildings due to location, orientation, design, construction, engineering services, and obviously the way that it's used and the way that it's maintained, really important. There are some parts of buildings from different architectural periods that can lend themselves to certain types of retrofit. And there are some periods where it totally negates the opportunity to sensibly consider certain types of retrofit. And I just picked a couple out just to give you a flavour of what we're sort of thinking about here. So we've got these Tudor buildings, and we've got a decent number of Tudor buildings scattered across Stratford-upon-Avon, Cheshire countryside, etc. These buildings tend to be using timber, brickwork. It's a style that's often referred to as the final development of medieval architecture. It's very focused on detail, so we get these quite small windows and doors, but they tend to be really ornately decorated. And one of the most striking architectural features is the often used oriel window. As we say, every property is different, but if we're looking at these, particularly that picture in the centre, look at that window there, we can see that we've got a huge recess there, and we've got the opportunity to consider secondary glazing. So something that's going to have a big impact on energy usage and savings, but it's going to have a very little impact into how that building looks aesthetically from the front if it's designed right and if it's installed right. Covering these types of buildings with external wall insulation is going to be a big no-no. But there is opportunities to improve the facades of these types of Tudor buildings. And that's exactly what we've done on the picture to the right. This is Bridgeford's, or was Bridgeford's in Northwich, or is it Nantwich, one of the two. So we can look at the infill materials, replace and restore them. So we're thinking about sort of wattle and daub. It needs to be well designed and constructed. We need to be paying a lot of attention, particularly the junction between the new material and the historic timber frame. But if it's done incorrectly, or if we're using inappropriate materials, then we're going to have a negative impact on that building and consequences which will negate any improvements that we were trying to achieve. We've got the Baroque style, which tends to be quite statement buildings. They're usually in significant grounds. So lots of royal residences, religious buildings were built in this particular style. And just the fact that they are, tend to be in large grounds means that we can consider things like ground source heat pumps that we perhaps can't think about for some of our city centre buildings where space is an issue. The Baroque style also tend to have hidden roofs. So we could think about PV. Listed building consent obviously will be required for solar panels, but they are likely to be accepted on listed buildings if they can be designed in such a way to avoid harm, sort of harming the special interest of the property. It's far less likely to be accepted on principal roof slopes. And as I said, it will require listed building consent. As a great example, Laura and I a few months ago, we were at Chester Cathedral as part of the IHBC event, and we did a tour of the cathedral. We went to the, I forgot what it's called, but they've created a new walk there where you go onto the roof of the cathedral. Fantastic views. And what we're looking at here is this secondary roof at Chester Cathedral, where they've installed PV. Fantastic example where it's been installed on a really significant building. They've done lots of retrofit work at Chester Cathedral. They've got secondary glazing, secondary doors. They're really forward thinking. And we've got the Victorian period. This is Industrial Revolution. We've got lots of innovations in transport, architecture, bricks and other materials like Welsh roof slates are transported nationwide. So we're getting this real sense of cohesion and uniformed construction across the UK. What we tend to find with a lot of our Victorian properties is they have little to no insulation. So there's a great opportunity for improvements that are non-invasive. Make sure you're using the right materials such as wood fibre, cellulose. Don't just think about the roofs, we can insulate the floor areas and wall areas too. Edwardian, so these are quite easily recognised. We start to lose the upper and lower floors, just with the way that we're sort of starting to live through that period. But there's just an example here of where we've installed slimline double glazing into existing period frames, and this seems to be being accepted by planners more and more now. It does require listed building consent. We're unlikely to do this where we can see that we've got original glass or glass of special interest. But most of these frames can actually take these slimline secondary double glazing units. And I think I've got a picture in here. Or maybe I've not. It might be further on where we've recently done some work for Manchester Met where we've installed that. I'm pretty sure there is a picture in a set. So this is just a snippet that I've taken from this Historic England advice note, and it just makes sense to me. I'll just read it verbatim. So, proposals to undertake changes to historic buildings in response to climate change are likely to be accepted where we've got a full understanding of significance, we've designed to avoid and then minimise impact, and we couldn't achieve those benefits in a way that would be less harmful to significance. Makes lots of sense, but and it seems so obvious, but we've seen so many occasions where that just very basic sensible principles are not being adhered to. So when we're talking about assessing significance, it's the act of reading a building in order to be able to understand it, and it's really important that we do that. We need to understand why it's valued. And so for the purpose of today, I've just taken 4 values that Historic England use: evidential, historical, aesthetic and communal. They include both tangible, intangible factors. So I'll just give you an example of how that actually works and the type of things that we're considering. So evidential, so this is a potential for a place to yield experience about past human activity and contribute to our understanding of the past. So this could be archaeological. We could be talking about things in the ground. So a great example, picture to the left-hand side, if anyone recognises that, that's Stockport Market. We did quite a bit of work on Stockport Market a number of years ago. We were improving the Victorian stalls internally, did lots of work to the externals as well. We did some very light excavation under the careful eye of, I think it was Salford Archaeology, and we uncovered some evidence of Roman activity. So that adds to the evidential value of that building. For us, it meant that all work stopped for a number of weeks whilst they came in with the little brushes, did what they needed to do until we were given the thumbs up to continue. But it doesn't need to necessarily be in the ground. The picture on the right-hand side, we wouldn't necessarily consider this an example of typical Victorian terrace, but it is a Victorian terrace. We can see some evidence of architecture that's been inspired by Regency period. We've got the stucco columns, and that really illustrates the challenges faced when we're identifying ages and materials that would have been used in some of our traditional buildings. And certainly the Victorians loved to copy designs. They made that a bit trickier for us. What we know about this group of buildings is that there's been lots of work done internally to these buildings, and we can see that through various planning applications. But the external facade is very much as originally conceived, designed, constructed. That adds to the evidential value of that group of buildings. So that will guide us to what we could and couldn't do in terms of retrofit. So we certainly won't be thinking about putting external wall insulation to the front elevation. That doesn't mean that we can't consider it at the back. So that it will guide our proposals. So historical. So this derives from the ways in which past people, events, aspects of life can be connected through a place to the present, and it is usually illustrative or associative. So we've got a few pictures here. The one to the left-hand side, a fairly functional looking prison. Doesn't seem anything of too significant. But when we realise that that's is it Robben Island prison, where Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for, I think, 17, 18 years, it changes the way that you feel about that building. It symbolises the triumph of human spirit, of freedom, democracy over repression. It still remains on the island as a landscape reflect of the history of the island since the 17th century and all the attributes that convey its value. So it changes the way that we feel about it. A couple of pictures here, both examples of street art. The one at the top doesn't look particularly special. We saw Banksy on there, we might change our mind. But if we take it in within its context and we take that whole building view, then what we're actually looking at there is the Berlin Wall. And all of this graffiti, some of it is quite modern, as you can tell. But graffiti in Berlin dates back to the 1970s. It was emerged as an expression of political dissent during the division that they had there. And it acted as a canvas for artists to sort of convey the frustrations and also their aspirations. Below that, we've got the Marcus Rashford mural. This was done during or just after COVID. It represented really the work that he'd put into the free school meals during COVID. And Marcus had quite a bit of abuse during the Euros, and that mural was filled with post-it notes of really positive messages for Marcus, which were later collected by Manchester University for a future exhibition. So that all adds to the historical significance. Aesthetic. So I'm not going to go into this too much because Laura's going to be talking to us about Moseley Road Baths, which is exactly what we're looking at here. But when we're talking about aesthetics, we're not talking about whether I like it or you like it. We're talking about what that building is trying to portray. So Moseley Road Baths is a very quick review of it. So during this time, Manchester, as an example, was leading the way in industry. We had all of our cotton mills. We're very proud of that. In the Midlands, they really were leading the way in health and sanitation. And you can tell by the crests that they've used here, or the coat of arms, which at the time Moseley Road Baths was built, this was the biggest coat of arms in Birmingham. So they're really flexing the muscles about, you know, what they're achieving in sanitation. So that's reflected on the architecture of this building. You know, we've got this, fantastic cusp in the terracotta. So that all adds to the aesthetic significance of that particular building. It doesn't need to be grand to be aesthetically significant. There's all sorts of things that can contribute to aesthetic significance, and sometimes they can be the, what I might think be the ugliest looking of buildings. Communal. So I take you now to Blackpool. Unfortunately, we're not on the Champs-Élysées here. We're looking at Blackpool Tower there. Just next to Blackpool Tower, we see the Price Busters building. So this is the second largest building, or tallest building, I should say, in Blackpool. And at one time it housed the largest Woolworths in the UK. So that was really exciting for its time. Lots of us would have travelled to Blackpool and we can still remember it. So it's all about having a collective experience or memory. So we'd have gone on school trips with grandparents. It was a hotspot as a holiday destination for many. And the Pricebusters building, not only did we rush to it, but also it would have been one of the last buildings that we could see, along with the tower, when we were doing any trips across the Irish Sea. So that adds to the communal significance. We had a scaffold up at the Pricebusters building for, I don't know, it must have been about 18 months, I think. And the community were extremely excited. Unfortunately, what the Pricebusters building had, it's a steel frame building. It had cathodic protection installed, gosh, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, the old-fashioned systems that relied on a permanent energy source. And it'd never been fitted properly or never been turned on. So they were wondering why this building was continuing to deteriorate. So we were putting up our scaffold to install the new CP system. I think it's a hybrid system that relies on a power source for a very short amount of time, and then it sort of pacifies and looks after itself. We did fix the clock for the community, so they were grateful of that. But when the scaffold came down, I think they were pretty disappointed. So that's what we're looking at when we're thinking about significance. That just gives you a sort of a taster of what the process and the thought processes that we're going through when we're putting together heritage impact statements. As we've seen, these buildings, traditional buildings, they are constructed differently if we compare them to modern buildings. So they perform differently, deal with moisture differently. We allow rain, groundwater, internal moisture to move in a controlled way through permeable fabric. So it's really important that we understand these materials. If we make changes to fabric performance or to heating and ventilation that are inappropriate, we can change the balance, and that can lead to all sorts of problems with overheating, with mould, and with ill health. So if we look at roofs as an example, so early traditional buildings will have been constructed of whatever materials were available locally. Sorry, I just got a tickle in my throat. There's lots of opportunities in our roofs, usually, to improve thermal performance without requiring any consents. If we've got if we suspect we've got an extension to a listed building, let's say, or a heritage building, or a building and conservation area, whatever, and we get our head in the loft space, that can often tell us a little bit about the story of the building. So very early traditional buildings were tend to be made up of sort of large timbers. That wasn't just because it was a material that was available. It was about our understanding of construction mechanics were certainly not what they are today. So as the years go on, we start to see that improve, and we see far less components, slimmer timbers being used. And sometimes an extension to a traditional building, you know, that extension might be what's significant about that building. It doesn't necessarily need to be the earliest part of the building. It usually is, but it's not always the case. External walls, just some example here of traditional solid walls. External walls insulation is unlikely to be accepted in most circumstances for our protected buildings, for sure. The external appearance of these buildings is an important component of the special interest, and also due to the materials and the relationship between eaves, windows, doors, and other details. Building of rubble stone were generally intended to be rendered for practical and aesthetic reasons. And in the 20th century, particularly, historic render was often removed just due to a misunderstanding of historic character. So we find that to be the case. We could consider reinstatement of that render to try and improve the thermal performance and it could be desirable on both counts, on thermal performance and on significance. Just some examples there of solid walls. So we've got that random rubble there. Most basic form of that is dry stone walling, but we do see it bound by lime, random squared, we've got coarse squared. So we're using bricks. We're looking for evidence of stretches and headers, and we've got the ashlar there with its very tight joints. So as we said, these walls allow moisture to pass and evaporate, and if we cover them with cementitious renders or gypsum plasters, we run that risk of trapping moisture, which can lead to damp. And it not only affects your health, but also the energy efficiency of these buildings as well. So pointing to traditional buildings, traditional walls needs to be done in line. It's really important that we maintain these buildings, particularly if we're going to be making changes to them. We need to make sure that they're in good condition. If we're going to be putting internal wall insulation on these traditional buildings, it's really very important that we've got our pointing and our masonry in good condition. Use lime, it's flexible, it's sacrificial to the masonry, unlike its cementitious counterparts. We've been doing a lot of work in understanding the various materials available for internal wall insulation. It's generally going to be accepted on traditional buildings, particularly if we've not got much in the way of historic interiors, or we've got interiors that have been lost or they've been compromised. If it's appropriate to line previously unlined walls as part of a conversion, there's an opportunity to introduce insulation there. It's not going to be accepted if we've got if it's going to have harmful effect, or we've got lots of historic plaster or joinery and cornices, chimney pieces, or other historic fittings. We've actually, Laura and I have been to a seminar this morning. We've had a long day today. We've been seminar at 7 o'clock and now another one at 6:30. But we were looking at IQ Therm, which is a product that's manufactured by Remmers, a really good product for internal wall insulation. Here, this is us doing some training with Warm Shell, which is a product by Lime Green company. Floors, there's a number of form of construction that we see in floors of these buildings. We've got concrete slab, limecrete, stone slab. We do sometimes find gypsum, particularly in early traditional buildings, if it was in a location where supply of that was plentiful. If we do find a gypsum floor, they usually have historic significance, worthy of conservation, and in many cases, it's going to have to be protected. They're going to be original to the building, and that authenticity contributes notably to the property's special interest. But you can see there, that's a typical suspended timber floor, probably a Victorian property. Opportunity there to add some insulation. We're not going to need any permissions for that as long as we're not changing floor levels or causing any disruption to any historical floor surfaces. Windows, we lose lots of heat through gaps in our traditional windows. It's just how they've moved and developed and distorted over time. It's part of what we love about our traditional buildings. It's really important before we start to do work to windows that we get them in a good state of repair. There's some very non-intrusive things that we can do to windows that can be really impactful. Draft proofing, that can entail the cutting of some grooves in historic joinery, but it's generally done in a way that doesn't harm the building's special interest. Secondary glazing, that's going to be generally acceptable, providing it's going to create significant improvements to thermal performance. What Historic England did some research a number of years ago on secondary glaze, and they found that it improved the performance of traditional buildings by up to 60%. It does take some consideration. It gets some advice. Don't seal your windows, then you're going to create a problem if you're putting secondary glazing in. You still need to think about that natural ventilation. and perhaps not do all of the windows, you know, to take a sensible approach. And what we love about secondary glazing also is that it's reversible. This is a picture I was looking for before. So this is an example where we've used an existing frame, and we've put in slimline heritage double glazing. So the picture on the right hand side there is from one of the buildings for Manchester Met University. It does require listed building consent, of course. And I'm going to pass over to Laura. I'll try and mute myself, Laura. But I'm not
Thanks.
sure.
I hope you can hear me. I think my internet's been a bit patchy. So yeah, as Lindsay mentioned, this is Moseley Road Baths. It's just a really good project to look at in terms of getting a bit more of an understanding of the categories of significance, and also we'll touch upon the retrofit measures we've been working on here. So it was opened in 1907. It's been opened for swimming ever since. It shut last October so that some more restoration work could be carried out. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to do the maths on that because I'll get it wrong, but it's been open for a long time. It's part of a really important group of civic buildings. So it's in the Borsall Heath area of Birmingham, which is just to the south of the city. And there's this stretch cut on Moseley Road of these civic buildings. So there's a library, there's sort of old bureaucratic offices and things like that. And it's a really amazing sort of heritage corridor, which has been neglected and is now in the process of being restored. So yeah, it just gives you a bit of background. If you ever get a chance to visit when it's opened, I would really recommend it, whether you go for a wander around or for a swim. And then just a bit of context of the timeline, because this really shows how important community is to our heritage. So it's thanks to community groups that we still have Moseley Road Baths, because it was very, very close to being shut down, abandoned, and sort of being left to fall down. So it was placed on Historic England's at risk register in 2005, and the year following that, the Friends of Moseley Road Baths community group formed to help save. Their first goal was to save the baths from being neglected, and then their sort of long-term goal was to see it restored. Unfortunately, in 2015, it was earmarked for closure by the council. This was due to funding cuts at the time. And the Friends group really just did a last-ditch attempt. They appealed to the World Monuments Fund, and they actually got it listed on the fund's watch list, which is pretty amazing. I think if you go on their website, obviously they deal with buildings and structures all around the world. I think there's only a couple that have been put on it from the UK in the last sort of 10-15 years. So in the following year, after obviously the World Monuments Fund put a bit of pressure on the council, there was a coalition formed. So this was spearheaded by the National Trust. It included Birmingham Council, the Moseley Road Baths Community Interest Organisation, which had sort of formed out of the Friends group, Historic England, and of course the World Monuments Fund. And then we were brought to site initially for phase 1 of the restoration work in 2021. We did mostly external work, but I just love these pictures so much of the old manager's flat that we restored, because you can see the state of the building and how important it is to not only restore these buildings, but also to maintain as many of the original features as we can. And then in terms of the significance categories, so for evidential value, because it sits within the wider context of this heritage corridor, it gives it quite a high level of evidential value. The building was actually built by the City of Birmingham Corporation back in the early 1900s, and this was given to the people of Borsall Heath to try and get them to join the City of Birmingham. So it provides insights into sort of the political landscape at the time, but also the routines and the general life of people in the UK and Birmingham at the turn of the century. So as Lindsay mentioned, Birmingham and the Midlands had a really big part to play in health and sanitation and things like that. So it gives us a view into what that looked like, and also attitudes towards gender and class. So there's men's first and second entrances to the baths, and also a woman's entrance. So there were segregated areas. So by keeping these original features, obviously we're not using them for the original use now, but it does give us a glimpse into the past and into sort of society at that time. And then historical value is huge for Moseley Road Baths. Obviously, we've mentioned this sort of its context within history, but it is the oldest of. There's only 5 Grade 2 style listed baths operating in Britain. It's the only one outside London that up until last year was still open for swimming. And if you visit Moseley Road Baths, it's amazing how, considering the sort of years of neglect and years of kind of being forgotten about, it's amazing how many of the original features and how much of the historic fabric has survived. So on the left, we've got the original drying rack. We see similar examples in Manchester, but nothing that's been as well sort of preserved as this. You've got the gala pool here, which is being used, well, was being used for events, but the hope is that this will be turned into a sort of second pool for swimming. But yeah, you can just see it and you walk around the building and it is really amazing. So Moseley Road does have a very high historical value. And then aesthetic, as Lindsay mentioned before, isn't really about whether you or I think a building looks pretty, because for what it's worth, I do think Moseley Road looks nice, but it's so much more than that. So Moseley Road Baths is a huge display of civic pride. It's sort of putting Birmingham on the map, trying to encourage the people of Balsall Heath to get involved. The kind of issue we have with this now is that the demographics of many areas have changed, including Balsall Heath. And Balsall Heath is a really, really diverse, very rich sort of cultural area. And we did some community engagement work with the architects and with the Friends group. And what we found was that a lot of people, although they find the building sort of architecturally impressive, found it very intimidating. So there's almost a sense of people walk past the building, they don't feel like it's for them, they don't feel very comfortable sort of going in the building. So a lot of the restoration work has kind of been coupled with how can we make this building more accessible and sort of keep its grand architectural facade and internal features, but also convey that it is a community building that was given to the community and still should be for the community. And then going on to community, as I mentioned before, we wouldn't have Moseley Road Baths if it weren't for the local community. It's really important. It's the source. A lot of people learn to swim there. It's a source of a lot of collective memories for people of all ages in not just Balsall Heath, but Birmingham more widely. And the future uses, really, there's been quite a few National Lottery Heritage funded sort of engagement programmes and activities and things like that. And this is to sort of engage with the community and find out what they need so that future uses alongside the Capital Works programme can really cater to needs rather than just sort of something that looks nice. And so again, the hope is that Moseley Road Baths has been this inclusive space for identity formation for over a century, and we want to see that continue when it reopens after the fabric restoration works. And then just in terms of some of the retrofit measures and potential energy efficiency options they're discussing at Moseley Road. So it was run primarily on gas, obviously having one pool running on gas with the view to having the gala pool set up it's a lot of gas, very high energy bills, quite an old system that they were working with. So we've introduced air source heat pumps to help with those costs. We've also considered insulation around the building, so roof voids have been insulated. And for this, we did consider a few different natural options, but we went with wood wool. So it can be used for the roof, it can be used for walls, and it's good because when it gets wet, it helps to wick that moisture away. So we don't see any sort of impacts on how well it is acting as an insulator if it's to get wet. So with mineral wool, if mineral wool gets wet, its effectiveness as an insulating material goes down quite substantially. We've fitted secondary glazing, slimline double glazing, depending. So we've fitted both the different parts of the building, and that's to maintain that natural flow of ventilation. We've upgraded the heating and lighting system, so everything's electric now, no reliance on gas. But we've maintained the original bakelite light switches, which is a nice touch, and again just adds into that significance of the building. Wall and floor insulation's been added where possible using natural materials. And it's not been done yet, but I know there's been some discussion around potentially using PV on the secondary roof, which would help generate, that the idea is that would generate enough energy to help heat and run those pools. I'll pass back to you, Lynn. Thank you.
Fabulous, thanks, Laura. And that's pretty much it. So I'll not read all that out to you. I'll let you guys just have a look at what we've covered. Happy to answer any questions. I don't know whether, do I need to stop presenting, Christine? Or can you take control?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? Stop presenting, yeah?
Yeah, please, thanks.
Stop presenting. I don't know who's in control now, but.
Okay. Are there any questions from anyone? No? Matthew Barker?
Yeah, I've got a question. Just in respect of those methods that we use to increase the thermal efficiency of the building or to make it more carbon efficient. I'm by no means an expert, very limited experience. So of those that we used, I mean, PVs maybe it's not been used yet. So which of those that we used would have contributed the most to making that building more efficient or more carbon neutral? Can you say, or maybe okay?
Sorry,
Are we talking about Moseley Road? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
the air source heat pumps, the wood wool, which would have contributed the most, do you think? Because I really don't know.
I think it's probably hard to say, to be honest. I think they're probably working in combination, and it's. I mean, I don't know what you think, Lindsay. I think it's probably quite difficult to sort of pick that apart and separate. Sort of.
Yeah,
what's
you've got,
working
you know,
best.
we've removed the use of gas, which is great, and then we've put insulation in that's going to help us in terms of using less energy. We've got the insulation there so that we can warm up the rooms quicker and cool them quicker, so we can, you know, we're not having to put heating on for hours at a time to get it ready for people to use the room. So with the insulation that's been used there, we can sort of put the heating on and have it warmed up fairly quickly. So we're using far more energy in that respect. But it's still a work in progress, to be honest, and they're going to have do quite a bit of evaluation over the next few years. There's still a lot of work to do at Moseley Road.
Right.
So it'll be suck it and see, I think.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
Okay. Michael Cross, do you want to ask a question?
Hello. I got a question about EPCs. So where you've got an EPC on a building, and you talked about they're only as good as the information that's offered to them. If you find that the recommendations are perhaps not achievable given the nature of the building, what steps do you take from that? So you've got an EPC where you believe the recommendations aren't appropriate.
Yeah.
What steps do you take from
I think if you've got a specialist team involved, I don't just talk about the contractor, if you've got, you know, a good heritage architect involved, they're probably not going to take, they're not going to let that EPC inform their decisions for planning. But certainly once they've done any retrofit work, they're going to want to have that EPC produced by somebody that's better qualified to do so. So, I mean, I don't know, do you get involved in EPCs at all?
A small amount, yes.
Yeah.
I'd say is it the case that you need to be careful about your selection of the assessor and making sure that they can properly assess the building with the...
Yeah, I think it's a really important part of it, because if we've got someone that's unfamiliar and you know, go, right, what building regs are we working to? Well, we're not working to any, so they just go to the worst sort of notional standard, and we're going to get some really poor results. And I've seen EPCs produced for traditional buildings that's made some crazy recommendations that we know would be wholly inappropriate, from sort of double glazed units and all the rest of it, that you just think, I mean, come on, you know, we've got a fairly significant building here. The software's not fantastic, so I think that's an area that needs to be looked at. Historic England, again, did some research. It was domestic buildings, so they were using RD SAP, and they took a a group of terrace buildings from various locations in the UK and did EPCs on them, using sort of, I don't know, local providers or whatever, but they found that the EPCs either under or overestimated the performance of the building by up to 40%, so fairly significant. And what we could find is if we're using that information, we're going to start over-engineering. We're going to start using more carbon to do retrofit. We're going to be doing things that, you know, perhaps we don't need to do. A lot of these buildings work perfectly fine if they're maintained properly. So it's just getting a good balance and a sensible team to be reviewing that along with what's significant about the building before we start going to planning authorities and putting our proposals forward. I hope that answers it. There isn't a quick answer to that. But it's predominantly down to the information that we input. If we input poor information, we're going to get poor information out of it in terms of recommendations and results.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Stephen Rizzo, have you got a question?
I do, thank you, and well pronounced, by the way.
Oh, I wasn't sure. I just thought I'll give it a whirl, see what happens.
Yeah, spot on. So my question for Lindsay is, under the new building regulations, do you take on the principal building regulation designer role? And if so, how has this now changed the way you consider the balance of responsibilities between heritage, conservation and building regulation compliance?
Well, no, we don't, but really interesting question that, Stephen. We had I was with I'm not saying council, but with the head of planning of a council in the UK, and they were saying, we just don't know how this is going to work, because actually as planners and as building control, we don't actually talk to one another. And who does this fall to? Where does it fall? And who makes final decisions? That role, thankfully. But I think it's they still need a lot of guidance on that, and I think and more collaboration within council is going to come up against, you know, some pretty big problems.
What about when there's a registered approver rather than a local authority building control? It then becomes even more complex, I suppose.
Yeah, we've not perfected this yet. We're going to make a lot of I think we're going to have to make some mistakes, because I think if we wait until everything's perfect, we're going to miss the boat. So there will be some mistakes made along the way, and some lessons learned, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Peter Duffy, have you got a question?
I have indeed. I might be able to help with that previous question as well about building control. My profession is a building control inspector, and that's what I do. And effectively, principal designer's role, it's more that effectively is more about taking responsibility for what you design and what you intend to put in place. Something you've done all the way along in your career, probably. It's just a bit more formal now. So it's just a declaration that you actually provide and state that the work, to the best of your knowledge, is in compliance with building regulations. As you say, on these buildings, it's a limited requirement for these, and it's the best you can do with what you've got. You know, so that's pretty much the pragmatic way of looking at it. My question was, obviously, in updating these buildings, some of these buildings materials they use, they do get affected by a change in the amount of moisture that's contained within the building and the flow of air in these buildings as well. How do you work that one through when you're doing the upgrades on these buildings? Because obviously retrofitting some of these buildings and bringing the standard up can sometimes have a detrimental effect on the building.
Yeah, it's not a fantastic line there, but I think I got the gist of it. It is quite right. It's about how we deal with moisture and where we might be putting in some sort of moisture on the materials that we're going to use, and particularly if we're thinking about internal wall insulation. It's really important that we consider the externals, the internals with that, because we're going to change the way, to a degree, how we by putting internal wall insulation, it has a massive impact on the external wall and the way that it would deal with moisture. So we need to make sure that we've got, you know, all the pointings in good condition. We might even be thinking about some sort of appropriate waterproofing type for facades. There's all sorts of things that we need to be considering to get the balance. It really does depend on what we're going to be doing. It needs to be done by, it needs to be designed well. We're not designers. We don't. We will specify materials to a degree, but we won't be designing retrofit projects as a whole. You know, we leave that to the people that can work, you know, do all of those calculations and lead the design. But yeah, there is all sorts of considerations, and we've seen some wonderful examples of where these things have gone wrong, where it's not been thought about properly. Yes, you're right. Ventilation is absolutely key. These buildings rely, they work in a totally different way. We don't have the barriers that we have in the modern buildings, so they rely on being able to self-ventilate, to deal with moisture, to deal with sort of water and vapour.
Okay, brilliant. I think we can wrap it up there and let you have some rest, given that you've been in seminars since the crack of dawn this morning. But thank you so much, and particularly taking time out of hours to come and deliver that presentation. It was really excellent. Thank you.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting us along. It's great, absolutely great to be here.
Yeah.
Okay, we will we'll let you carry on, and there is a CPD certificate for this. If you'd like us to forward it across.
Yeah, if you send it across, we can. Well, I'll drop you an email following this, and then we can.
Yeah, we'll sort it out after. We'll sort it out. Lovely. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks everyone.
And hopefully catch you again. Cheers.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Lindsay.